Hello, friends. Just wanted to take a moment and do a sort of constructionist short. Just something small, not long, but something hopefully potent and concise. So, I've been trying to focus more, or concentrate more, or learn more, or meditate more, or practice the concept of prayer. And one of the things that I was reminded of in my various studies of the scripture and going back a number of years is the whole concept of the tabernacle and what the tabernacle actually does say about prayer. So I don't know if you've ever done an in-depth study on the tabernacle. I would highly recommend it. It's quite a fascinating topic to dig into. But let me just show you a little photograph of the tabernacle. Here it is right here. It's not a photograph. That was a dumb thing to say. This is my sketch of the tabernacle. But it's got all the basic parts to it. There's obviously more than this. But at the top we have the mercy seat, and that's the first thing that's mentioned in the study of the tabernacle if you're doing it in the order that it's presented in Exodus. It begins with the mercy seat, which is really important because that's the whole focal point of the tabernacle of where God dwells. God dwells here in the Holy of Holies in the mercy seat. Now, if you've never looked at the tabernacle, I should probably tell you this is a map. So if you were to ever visit the tabernacle, which there are some life-size tabernacles out and about, I know Teen Missions International made a life-size tabernacle that they toured around. They're based in Florida. There's another life-size tabernacle that is situated at the Passion Play in Eureka Springs, Arkansas. So either one of those are places you can go and actually see a life-size tabernacle. But this thing is, as you walk into it, if you were actually to come here, you would enter in through a gate or a fence right here, and you would walk up to the altar of sacrifice. You would present your sacrifice, goat, grain, sheep, bull, something like that. The priest would meet you here and go through that. That's as far as you as the offerer would go, but the priest is allowed to go up to the laver, and the laver is the place where he would wash and get the blood off his hands and things like that. And then the next stage after that would be entering into an actual tent. This is all open air out here. This is a tent, a covered tent. And when you enter into it, on one side you have the table of showbread, which was a table with 12 loaves of bread for the 12 tribes of Israel. On the other side is a lampstand, which is the menorah. It's got the 7 lamps on it, all one stand, 7 lamps. Then there's an altar of incense, which is what we want to talk about here in a moment. And then another curtain or gate or barrier. It's not really a gate, it's a veil. It's a hanging curtain that blocks the way into now the Holy of Holies, which had in it the Ark of the Covenant, famous Indiana Jones film and all that. Don't listen to a thing they say about the Ark in the Indiana Jones film. It's terribly ignorant of what the Bible itself actually says. So, here is where God dwells. So we're told in Exodus that the presence of God came, and in the daytime it was a pillar of cloud, and at night it was a pillar of fire that actually resided over this portion of the tabernacle, and that when you went inside, it was the light of God, Shekinah of God, that actually illumined that room. The light source in this room would have been the lampstand, and as you walked in, it would have been on your left-hand side. Table of showbread would have been on your right-hand side. But what I want to emphasize right now is this idea of altars. There's 2 altars in the tabernacle, and one of them has a lot to do with prayer. So altar number 1 was where you came and presented a sacrifice of a bird or a goat or a sheep or a bull or grain. Then the second was not the offer of the animal or the offering could go, but the priest would be able to go up to the altar of incense. And sometimes, depending on the offering, the blood of this animal would get sprinkled onto this altar. So there was a direct connection in certain sacrifices to these 2 altars, altar 1, altar 2. Now, the word altar in Hebrew, I've got it up here on my Blue Letter Bible. I would highly recommend Blue Letter Bible. It's a marvelous study tool. Up here on the screen, Mizbeh is the word for altar in Hebrew. Now, Hebrew all has root verbs. All Hebrew nouns, adjectives, things like that, names, all come from root verbs. So it's always important to look up what the root verb is of the noun or the word that you're looking up, if it is a verb or if there's a root verb to it. There's always a root verb. So the root verb for altar is the Hebrew word zabach, zabach. And what zabach means is to sacrifice or to offer or to kill or to slay. So an altar is actually a place where sacrifice is killed. It's the place of killing sacrifice. So why is there an incense altar? Why is there an actually a place in the tabernacle where incense is burnt? And we're told in the book of Revelation that the incense is the prayers of the saints. Read the book of Revelation twice. It says in there that incense is the prayers of the saints. So what that tells us, going back to the tabernacle, when you look at the whole of Scripture, is that prayer is something that is sacrificial. It's something that has to be offered, in a sense, on an altar, which is a place of death. And so, really, prayer is dying to self. It's not about what your preferences are or really what you want. It's about what you want the Lord's will to operate in. So remember the Lord's Prayer, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Prayer is actually praying for God's will to become a reality on the earth. And that's not something you can make up as an individual. You have to know God's will from Scripture. It tells us what it is. But the challenge in prayer is that it's a spiritual exercise. It's actually hard. If you think maybe you find prayer quite easy, then you probably haven't really prayed in the fullest sense of prayer. And I can say that for myself as well. I find prayer difficult. There was a time where I thought maybe prayer was easy, but I think more and more it's actually quite a challenge because I've discovered and learned that it is about sacrifice. It's about a place where offering and sacrifice and death happens. And so Paul says in 1 Corinthians 15, he says, I die daily. It's an act of death to pray because you're giving up of yourself and you're giving yourself over to the Lord. So an extreme or intense example of this is Jesus in the garden right before he's arrested. He's in the Garden of Gethsemane. All of his apostles are falling asleep. And what is he praying at that late hour? He's praying, not my will, but yours be done. So this is all wrapped up in this idea of death to self, let God live through us. And it really is a great challenge. So that's my little tidbit of my construction is short. I hope that was an encouragement and a strength to you, and God bless you. We'll see you again next time. And by all means, pray.